Greets peeps, this is Tony the Hero of Flanders. Flanders. Tony the Hero of Flanders. I don't know why I'm the Hero of Flanders, they're my personal union. Maybe I came from there. Maybe I married into the Burgundy family and somehow I've become the boss of it, I don't know. But we'll figure it out later. So last time we spoke about provinces and all the things that we can do in them. I don't think there was anything I wanted to do within any of our provinces at the moment. Our options are very limited. At the moment the only buildings we can build are forts, and we don't need any more of those. We've already got 4 of them if I recall. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's fine. That's all we need. We do not need the expense of more forts. What we do need to do is start going through these things up the top. We've explained the military points, we've explained the provinces, we've explained our advisors. We need to start thinking about our treasury. So, at present, we have 207 ducats and we get 1.36 per month. You can see that taxes account for quite a bit, trade second most, production third most, and vassals fourth most. Then the expenses that we have are our forts and our state maintenance. Let's get into the economy. Right. So, what we can see here is that our taxation has a bonus of plus 20% from our clergy. That bonus is only there because their loyalty is between 40 and 60%. Well, sorry, is over 40%. If we go above 60, that bonus is still there, but it doesn't change. That was one of the things I did very early on in this game, is I would always try and push the loyalty of the clergy as high as I could, thinking that the tax modifier would go up. It does not. They give you as much money when they're 40% loyal as they would if they were 100% loyal. So it's definitely not worth doing that. 20% bonus from the clergy. There's many more bonuses that come into the game later on. When we start, clergy is the only bonus that we've got. We can see that we get a base income of 1. I believe every state gets a base income of 1 ducat a month, regardless of size. If you get once you change up in ranks from duchy, which we are now, to kingdom and then to empire, I believe that gives you a base bonus as well, but I can't tell you yet. No, it doesn't tell us. Our production gives us 2.2. We can see by scrolling over the number itself, we can see the states that give us the most money. Which was the one that we went crazy upgrading? Hainaut. So after that crazy upgrade that we did, trying to get the bourgeois on our side, we can see that Hainaut is now a good tax production, and our best production money giver guys. We can see that most of our trade comes through Champagne, but a little bit from the English Channel. We'll have a look at the trade part later on. We have no provinces producing gold, which is a bummer. We'll have a look at that shortly. As far as I'm aware, nowhere in Europe produces gold, but there is a map mode down here that shows us the trade goods. So I think the Spaniards have some gold. Yeah, La Mancha. So if we have a look at that, their production is gold. Can we see their finances? No. No, we only ever see our finances. The basics of it is that gold gives you lots of money, and it's an amazing thing to have. And oh, hang on, these guys have got. Oh, yeah, of course I knew they did. I didn't realise Bohemia did. That's interesting. And in the last game that I played, I was in control of them. I should have known about that. I did know about that, I just forgot about it. And I never developed it because I'm an idiot. Never needed to. But yes, so gold's great to come by, but it also causes some other troubles. It increases your interest. We'll come to that interest very shortly. Not your interest, your inflation rather. Tariffs, you get tariffs from having colonies. We have no colonies at the moment. That won't be a part of the game until very late on, if ever. We have one vassal who gives us 0.58 per month, which is very nice. The bonuses that we get to that from the government type and from our legitimacy, increase that amount of money. Our legitimacy can't get much higher than that. In fact, it's only going down, so we should probably do something about that. Harbour fees, subsidies, spoils of war. So harbour fees come to you when you allow other nations when other nations request to dock at your ports. That almost never happens. You get subsidies from other nations when you're fighting one of their enemies. They may subsidize you to fight their enemy better. They can't directly involve themselves in a war, but they still may want to cause damage to the enemy. Subsidies are a good way of doing that. That happens very rarely, but it does happen. Spoils of war is money that comes into your coffers from pillaging other areas, for having your army parked on someone else's property. While they're there, they'll wreck the place, take their loot and return it to you. War reparations come to you when you've had a war with someone, you've made a treaty, and you've said, listen, this war cost me a lot, you're gonna foot the bill. They will pay you they pay you 10% of their income, which can be a really good source of income. And condottieri is when you've loaned out your troops to fight in someone else's war. We'll come to that later. So our total income is 10.7. There's no breakdown of it because it's just the sum of those numbers. And we have no inflation because we have no gold mines, nor do we have any other... inflation is affected by a whole number of things, mainly by gold coming in, or often by gold coming in, but also by debasing your... Oh, I haven't got that on. Okay, so there's an add-on that there's a DLC that changes the economic options within a game, which I thought I had on. Weird. Yeah, that adds another whole sphere to the economy game, which is would be very tricky to explain, and I'm glad I haven't got it on. We have no war exhaustion, so that doesn't affect our income, and we have 147 provinces, which 147 development, which explains where, and this explains where each of those come from. Buttons we have down the bottom here, raising war taxes, that reduces the cost of navies and armies while you're at war. Costs 50 military power, so it is fairly expensive, but can be worth it depending on the type of war that you're fighting and the size of your economy and all sorts of other things. Reducing inflation. Inflation, as I said, increases from gold, but also from having loans. It's a bit tricky to explain, but you can reduce it spending your admin. I didn't even think to mention these before, but you can increase. Yeah, you can spend war taxes, your mill power here, your admin power here, and you can declare bankruptcy, which is something we'll hope to avoid. But is that worth explaining at this juncture? Okay, so you can take a loan. When you take a loan, we can have 46 bank loans of 77 ducats at the moment. That's a whole lot of money. But when those loans can't be paid back, because each loan that you take adds interest and causes inflation, you will see... I can't remember whether it does cause inflation. It definitely causes interest. I'm certain it does inflation as well. Because you've got all of this money just appear in your economy all at once, the costs go up, your inflation goes up. Yeah, it does increase your inflation. Oh, there we go, but by point 1, by taking a loan. So, if you take too many loans, you can end up in a debt spiral that the only way to get out of it is by declaring bankruptcy. When you declare bankruptcy, your armies turn to poo, all of your allies hate you, basically you're just in real trouble. It's something I may try to do at some point in the future, and I'll make sure I show you. But and there's ways and means to work with it, but it's an interesting beast. Now, our expenses. If you remember, we saw the last month we had an income of 1.36. We can see now that our expected monthly income is only going to be 0.01. That's because since we had that income coming in, that 1 point whatever it was, we've done some development, there's been a couple of different things have happened, but we also hired the 2 advisors. So they combined cost us 1.5 ducats. We then have state maintenance, which is basically the more states you have, the more maintenance that you pay for them, and a bunch of things contribute to how much those states cost. We'll come to that later. Will we? No, we won't. Let's examine that now. So what we can see is that Picardy costs 0.33. The reason for that is best seen here. So it's the development and distance from your capital that increase your state maintenance. So what we can see if we look at this one is very little because they're right next to us. The distance modifier is tiny, and they're our capital states. If we look over here, it's much more. It's much more because not much more, but it's more because of the distance, and the development to an extent costs some money as well. So while development increases your income if it's tax or production, if it's military, it will increase the cost. So there's very much a balancing act in this game as concerns economy. Interest, we don't have any loans, so we don't have any interest. Diplomatic expenses, we don't pay anyone anything at the moment. We're not subsidizing anyone. We're not a colonial nation. No war reparations. None of those things are costs to us, so we don't need to worry about those. Fort maintenance, we do pay fort maintenance. We want our 4 forts running at full capacity in case someone attacks us, and we can afford it, so there's no reason to mothball them. What you will typically do is you'll have your forts on the board, or what some people sometimes do depending on the situation, is you'll have mothballed forts in the background in areas that won't likely be attacked. I can't say that we're safe in any of these areas. We need to look at the diplomatic map to make a decision on that. It's possible that we could turn off that fort because our ally has a fort here which would do a similar job and would prevent people coming through and taking the fort straight away, meaning that if it was mothballed, we'd have time to turn it on at a later date. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. At the moment, being a fully maintained fort, it costs us 1. If we take the maintenance off, it costs us only half. So that's turned red, the garrison disappears immediately. If we turn it back on, we're going to have to wait a long time for those several months for those for this for this garrison to be full again. So turning forts on isn't something you can do immediately. You need to consider your actions with regards to that. We're in a similar situation here where Bawa and Arethel both have forts. They're both that's our vassal. Sorry, that's our junior partner, that's our vassal. So we can turn this one off as well. Oh, don't press that button. That is the destroy castle button. The same thing would apply for any other building type. That's the one I wanted. Now we can have a look at our income, and we can see that we've reduced our costs by an entire ducat by turning off those two forts. There's other reasons not to do that, but we'll come back to that. There's other reasons to keep your forts running, but we'll come back to that later. Colonial maintenance, we don't have any colonies to support, or missionaries doing any work, or any corruption that we're trying to root out. The cost of rooting out corruption is potentially huge. It's 0.025 per development to combat corruption. Let's think about the development that we've got. If we had one corruption... corruption's a funny beast, it's quite tricky to explain. But if we had corruption that we were trying to get rid of, it would cost 0.25, so that's 1 per every 4 development. No. It's 0.1. It's 1 per every 40 development. So, we would have to pay 3.5, almost 4, almost 4 ducats to remove that corruption. That would be extremely expensive. I'll regularly come into a game, turn that up full, and then get a corruption event that just sees my economy spiral because I had that up too high. Usually I'll leave it at about half. That's less likely to make you instantly bankrupt, take an instant loan, and instantly be paying interest repayments. Not a good idea if you can avoid it. Last two expenses are our army maintenance. So we've only got the one army. It's made up of 10 men, each who cost. Come on. What? I don't know why. I thought that showed it. No. Okay. Oh, there we go. So each infantry regiment costs 0.21 ducats, and each cavalry unit costs 0.52 ducats. So they're quite expensive cavalry. It's something that a lot of people avoid using cavalry entirely. I don't. The combat is a strange enough engine that I don't trust not having cavalry involved. So I'll typically stick with a particular unit formation. We'll come to that later. We can turn down our unit maintenance to reduce our costs. This will keep our army alive, keep our army in the field, but they won't be prepped and ready to go. When we turn that back up, it will take them a certain amount of time to get back to full combat readiness. You'll see the bar there, the green bar. If I slide this down, oh, it doesn't. Okay, so just that brown bar says that their morale is going down. It's less than what it will. It's less than full by the end of the. Once the month ticks over. We'll do that. We'll do that for now, just so I can show you that when we tick over to the next month. From the military, when I speak about the military, but in the meantime, we're making an extra 50.5 ducats That's a nice sort of an income for this early in the game. It also means that if someone attacked us, we would take some time to get them back to full combat readiness, and they'd be much more likely to get routed, to take injuries, to eat into our manpower, to cause other trouble that we'll talk about later. Fleet maintenance is the cost of keeping our navies on the go. We'll come back to that later. There's different ways of doing things that we can discuss at a later point, but after fiddling with these a little bit, we've got our economy at a healthy 1.5 increase per month. We can now look to use this bonus to employ one of our advisors that we looked at before. So what we can see is, if you remember when we were looking in the estates, we went into nobility and we recruited a minister to bump up our happiness. God, why did I do that? We'll come back to that later. We recruited a minister to bump up our influence, and that minister is now available. He was this chap, I can tell, because his cost is half of what a similarly skilled advisor would be. If we wanted to get 2 monarch points, we could pay 62 ducats, and 4 ducats a month, and we would get this guy who would give us a bonus, which we'll come to later. This guy, because we hired him through our nobility, is only 2 ducats a month, but that's still too rich for our blood, unfortunately. We don't have the economy to cover that. So what we're going to do instead is we will hire this guy. We'll do that in a different video. But we now have the money, because we freed up that extra cash. We now have the money to hire a 3rd advisor, and we can get 9 monarch points in each of these until for the duration of the reign of this ruler. So that'll about cover us for economy. There's a lot more stuff to it, but there's some cross talk with trade. So we'll round out this video for the moment, and we'll come back in the very near future. Thanks for hanging around.